What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 73. This week we had a really good conversation with Austin Stone from Tactical Approach Outdoors. He was really good to talk to about what they do. We talked to him about how his season went this year, some of the most common mistakes he sees from hunters, because he does teach hunting courses and he does some consulting as well. We got into a lot of public land stuff because that's a lot of what they do. Got into kind of their YouTube channel content that they put out. It was a really good conversation, so I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Stick around for that. Before we get into it, though, don't forget to support the podcast, and you can do that through our sponsors. The first one being Rodney Hawkins, who was on last week's episode, so go check that one out, and you'll hear even more about what I'm getting ready to tell you. If you're looking for a piece of ground to manage and hunt, Rodney's the guy to talk to. He grew up hunting and fishing in Southern Illinois, and he's now putting that love of the outdoors into selling recreational properties as a land specialist with Midwest Farm and Land. Midwest Farm and Land isn't your average real estate company. They sold over $85 million worth of ground in 2022 with agents like Rodney all over Illinois. They're truly a local company with a national reach. For more info, you can call him directly at 618-925-3153, and he'll get you taken care of. He's also recently started a new company called RHO Outdoors. He's currently carrying hard and soft-sided blinds and blind chairs, all from Radix Blinds, in addition to an all-natural scent elimination product called Camo Dust, which you can get more info on at camodust.com. He's also got Byrna self-defense firearms now and Tacticam trail cameras, Nate spent a lot of time in one of the Radix blinds this year. He loved it. It worked out great for him. If you're interested in any of those or any of the other great products he's got to offer, you can check out the Facebook page, RG Outdoors. Email them at rgoutdoors@yahoo.com, or again, just call Rodney directly, 618-925-3153. Our other sponsor for the podcast is Grandpa Ray Outdoors. You guys know, if you listen to this, they specialize in providing the best nutrition for the whitetail deer on your property, starting with the soil. They've got a full line of high-quality food plot seed and plant foods. They were started in 2015, but John's been in the seed and nutrition business since 1991. With over 14 different food plot blends to choose from, you're not going to have any trouble finding what you're looking for, and they're all going to be quality. You're not going to be paying for filler. It's really good, pure seed. Great germination rates on everything they sell. They've got fall and spring blends, corn and beans, switchgrass, liquid fertilizer, soil test kits, you name it. When it comes to food plots, they've got it. They're not just about selling their products, though. They're a really great resource if you have any questions about what blends would be best for you and your specific property. That way you can get the best results possible. John and his team don't believe in a cookie-cutter approach to wildlife nutrition. They're going to treat you and your situation individually. They don't have fancy labels on their packaging either. It's just plain Jane, because they're not focused on that. They're focused on the good quality seed and taking care of their clients. That's where they spend their resources. We've used their seed blends on client properties all over the Midwest. We've used them on our own properties, and the results have been as good as advertised. That's why we could partner with them on the podcast to start with. That's why we're going to continue to do so and continue to plant their seeds. You guys can check them out at grandparrayoutdoors.com and use discount code RHO Podcast. That's all lowercase, no spaces, and get 5% off your order there. Also, don't forget to check out our website, ridgehunteroutdoors.com. Anything you see on there, use the code RHO Pod. That's all caps, and you get 10% off anything in your order there. Also, you can follow us on Apple Podcast and leave us a review there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like and comment on any of the videos, and then follow us, leave us a review on Spotify as well. All that stuff helps support us, helps with the algorithms that they have out there for getting the podcast out, and we appreciate you guys tuning in and listening. Now let's get into the conversation with Austin Stone. This is the Ridge Hunter Outdoors Podcast. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in this week. We got another guest on. This week is Austin Stone from Tactical Approach Outdoors. What's up, Austin? How's it going, man?
Good. How about yourself?
We're doing good here. So like I said, everybody, that the first time they come on, I want to get kind of to know you guys a little bit, let the audience get to know you guys. So we kind of start from the beginning. So way back when you started hunting, like what age did you first start hunting, whether that be, what did you start with too? Was it whitetails or something else? And who kind of got you into it?
My dad got me started at a pretty young age. We were chasing squirrels and hunting some small game, growing up for a while, and my first whitetail hunt, I was 9 years old when Dad took me out. I didn't carry a rifle. I was just kind of along for the ride,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up shooting a pretty nice basket rack that day. So that was a pretty fun experience. And then I started carrying my own rifle when I was 10, and it just kind of has gone from there. So I've always been a public land hunter. He's My dad got me figuring out how to hunt public land, work a little bit harder than the next guy, and got to see a lot of success through the years to taking that approach, and just kind of developed it from there.
Yeah. So when did you start hunting by yourself? Was it when you got your license and you were able to drive? And I guess we're talking about Iowa here. Is that where you grew up and started hunting too?
Missouri.
Missouri. Okay.
I'm
Okay.
Missouri, yes, sir.
Okay. I was thinking Iowa, but okay. So what part of Missouri?
The Kansas City area, actually.
Oh, cool. Cool. We've actually
So
done
we
a little bit of work out there, kind of on the Kansas Missouri border, but
That's awesome. Yeah, we've usually hunted that northern end of Missouri, so up close to Iowa.
mm-hmm.
We spent a lot of time in the on a lot of northern properties. I ventured south just a little bit, but I found so much luck kind of in the central part of the state and north that I just kind of stick with it.
Right. I guess you see mostly. Is there more ag up in the north and central part of the state?
Yeah, it is. It's a lot more diversity when it comes to overall vegetation and food that they've got available. Like you said, a lot more ag. As you get further south in the state, you get into a lot more cattle pasture and
Mm-hmm.
a lot more oak mass trees that these deer have to forage on. So
Right.
the taste is definitely different, and the body size is different. There's still some giants.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, but definitely a little bit different taste in the meat and overall body size, which is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. That's something you don't really think about a lot. Is what they're eating and where they come from has an effect on how they taste too.
It does 100%. The more actual agriculture, soybean and corn that they have to feed on, I've always found to have a little bit more flavor
Mm-hmm.
in the meat than just kind of a random browse and just acorn diet, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we get too far into anything else, so you're hunting with your dad at 9 and 10 years old, and then you start hunting by yourself at some point, like high school, that range.
Yeah. So my brother started hunting about 2 years. He's a couple years younger than me, so he started hunting a couple years after
Mm-hmm.
I got started. So my dad started leaving me a little bit more often in the woods. I was able to go do my thing kind of on my own. Around that 12, 13 range. And of course, once you got your lot license, I went and did a lot of hunting by myself, carrying my bow, and found some properties close to home with some friends that we were able to hunt throughout high school. And yeah, so I started going by myself as early as I could.
Right, right. And is that when you started bow hunting too, or did your dad kind of get you into that as well?
Yeah, he got me going with that as well. I shot a little youth model for a long time, and then
Mm-hmm.
I got a bow that was able to actually hunt with and go kill a deer probably when I was 13.
Yeah.
And then I upgraded to this bow I actually have currently probably when I was about 15. Honestly, I've been shooting this bow that I have currently for, you know, 15 to 16 years now.
Yeah. What kind of bow is it?
I'm with you.
It's a Matthews Adrenaline.
Okay. So I had a bow that I got when I graduated high school. It was a 2013 model, and then I actually went back to a 2011 model. So I'm shooting a bow that's 12 years old too, and Dad's shooting one.
I'm shooting a Bowtech Patriot that's got to be like an '02 model, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm at 20 years probably or better.
Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Well, that's kind of the way I look at it. There's a few times that I'm sure the draw cycle would be more comfortable, and at the range I could shoot longer distances more comfortable. But when I'm out deer hunting, I'm pretty tight to these deer, so
Mm-hmm.
I've never had any issues with this bow, and it just keeps kicking. And like you said, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
That's right. Yeah. So you start hunting by yourself there in high school, and then eventually, obviously, that leads into what you're doing now at Tactical Approach Outdoors. Did you start that on your own? Did you start it with your brother? Did you start it with some friends? How'd that come about?
So this was me and my brother. This was our idea to get into this. We were wanting to do something for a long time, but didn't really know what route to take, and get into filming and whatnot. So when I was able to get my first camera and actually start self filming, I think I was mid-20s when I kind of got that started and started learning that, and the filming aspect of it, and actually learning the industry
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. And then we came up this name is how we like to go about our hunting. So tactical approach. We have a very tactical approach to our hunting. We're very precise. We like to not necessarily just work harder than the next guy, but hunt a little smarter. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Find those off the wall places. Be more precise with our hunting rather than just randomly hunting. That's kind of always what we've done. So we figured the name fit pretty good. And something too, I was, you know, when growing up, we were reading articles and we were watching the VHS tapes, Monster Bucks
Oh, yeah.
and shows a lot like that. So one thing that I saw though is I felt like there's kind of this gap in the information when it comes to the education side of deer hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And with the articles being short and whatnot, it was hard to find detail and the why behind things. You'd read an article and say, hunt scrapes, you will kill big bucks when you hunt scrapes. But what it doesn't tell you is that most scrapes are worthless to hunt, especially on pressured ground.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there's so much more detail that actually needs to go into the understanding of what scrape to hunt, when to hunt it, and then the why behind it. And that's just something you didn't really get in most articles. And nowadays, with the internet and social media the way it is, that information gap really has been shrunk big
Right.
time. But that's really the reasoning behind us getting this started in those beginning phases.
Yeah, so how long have you guys been doing it now? What year did you guys start?
So we had the name and started to self film and kind of got the YouTube channel started. I want to say maybe 17.
Yeah.
And the the business idea, it was 16 or 17 when we got that going, but the business idea actually came about during COVID. That's when it really figured out what path to take
Mm-hmm.
and how I wanted to develop this brand and this business. And then so really the last couple years is when we've had um, a developed brand and developed business and a path to take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels between, sounds like, what you guys have done and what we've done. Um, aside from you guys kind of starting on the media side, during COVID is when we started Ridge Hunter Outdoors. Yeah. I'd already been doing a little bit of stuff before, but then it was like, why not do it and put it out there for more people to see and work for and work with and all that. So we started, I think, July of 20 on like the consulting and the management side of things. And then eventually, like what you're saying, you get out there and talking to guys that are hunting or trying to hunt, and you realize that there is that information gap, or there is just a lack of good information out there. Because even though there is considerably more now with the mediums that we do have, there's still, you can get in the wrong places and find the wrong information. So that's really why we started doing the podcast, and that's led into some of what we're doing on YouTube now. But we're nowhere near where you guys are at on YouTube. I was watching some of your guys' stuff, and it's really good. I was really impressed with the stuff you guys are putting out and the deer you're killing and all that.
Appreciate that, man. I really enjoy, building those videos and keeping a lot of information and education in those videos while we go along the scouting and the hunting. So I enjoy it, and I'm glad folks get something from it and helps them out for sure. So
Yeah.
I did it.
Yep. I think you guys have some really good content, especially compared to a lot of the other guys you see. And I honestly think it's right up there with some of the bigger names that you see. It's just, you got to keep plugging away at it, and eventually, and you guys have a pretty good following, I guess, too, right now.
Yeah, it's grown substantially. Honestly, the last year.
Yeah.
This last year has been a huge growth when it comes to our platforms, and of course, it's translated over to business as well. But when it comes to the overall following on the platforms, this last year has really taken off, and I've kind of figured out what my followers really enjoy watching, and how to reach more people as well. So I just got to, it's like you said, you just got to stay consistent, keep plugging away, keep putting videos out there and let it work.
So you think that's kind of probably been the biggest thing as far as getting your followers, your viewership up, is just you're starting to get even better idea of what people are wanting to see, and kind of building your videos towards that more often.
Yeah. So I've kind of started getting an idea what people are wanting to watch. Just kind of not only seeing what the overall interaction is on the platforms, but also talking to folks. Through Messenger or comments, and at those expos, and just actually talking and networking, kind of seeing what people are really getting into, what the videos are talking about the most and like the most. Obviously, the hunting videos are definitely going to be your biggest hits,
right?
But unless you've got a huge team of guys, there's no way you can create enough content to satisfy the platform, basically,
sure.
and really grow. So that's kind of where and also that's not the only reason I built this company. This company wasn't built on just showing a hunting video. It needed, I wanted some meat and potatoes. I wanted some substance to my videos outside of just the hunt, or wanted to really tell the story and then throw some educational sense into it while you see everything playing out.
Right.
So that's kind of, and finding kind of the content folks like to watch and the length of the videos, and then being consistent has been huge.
Yeah.
And just continually putting stuff out there, because that's how the platforms will like your profile as well.
Right.
You just have to put content out there without flooding it. So it has been a lot of work, but I enjoy it. That is for sure.
Yeah, that's one thing that I don't know, it's been probably not close to 10 years ago now. We had thought, me and a group of friends had thought about starting to do video stuff, and even doing the videos we're doing. Like you said, you get to thinking about it, and where we're at, we're hunting mostly private ground in Illinois, pretty much exclusively. So we're allowed $2 per person in Illinois. So even if we got 4 guys, okay, that's 8 hunts that people are actually going to want to watch.
Yeah.
That are going to get a substantial amount of views. And then that's if every guy kills his limit every year.
If you score something, somebody wants to see you shoot. Yeah.
Right. So
absolutely.
There's definitely a limit on it. But I think what you guys are doing too is beneficial, where you're hunting public ground, because even when you're not killing deer on camera, there's always something you can learn from watching. And I think right now there's a huge, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but people are looking for that content, like on public ground. It seems to be becoming more and more popular. Like you look at the hunting public, how much they've grown in the last handful of years, just after leaving Midwest Whitetail. And I think you guys are falling right into that too, and kind of picking up some of that following, seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. And that there is a huge, because that was a big part of the industry. I talked about that kind of information gap, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe some people kind of getting left out of the industry, as us public land hunters.
Yep.
And what drove me for a long time, through the years growing up and becoming a better hunter, was I refused to believe that the only way to consistently harvest big mature bucks was that you needed privately owned, managed, manicured properties.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just refused to believe that that was the only way that you could consistently harvest big mature bucks.
Right.
So, so it kind of just put me on this path and kind of fired me up, and drove me to learn and really try to figure out how to consistently kill private land caliber bucks on public land. That's always been what has drove me, and has got my learning all fired up throughout the years.
Yeah, and there's actually a guy that's hunting private ground, and this probably goes into that. People looking for that public ground, those videos and stuff, and content on that information, is you can take a lot of the stuff you're doing on public ground and it translates to private ground hunting. Like it's hunting strategy like you're talking about, and having a tactical approach to it. Whereas a guy who can only hunt public ground is not necessarily going to get as much from a guy who's just showing you how to hunt a food plot.
Yes, 100%. And because on public ground, if you're hunting the ag fields and you're hunting the food plots, more than likely you're not going to see daytime movement, and if you do, it's going to be some does and maybe some young bucks.
Mm-hmm.
But those big mature deer, they're not going to step out into that open field during daylight unless unless you have a spot that for some reason is just kind of a unicorn of a spot that these deer aren't getting pressured. But
Mm-hmm.
especially nowadays, with as many people hitting public kind of the way they are, there is no spot you're going to find that's not getting pressured. So in some kind of manner, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, if you take that approach into these pressured lands, you're not going to see any deer, much less the caliber of deer that you are wanting to harvest.
Mm-hmm.
So you gotta get a little creative, and that's what I enjoy about consulting and taking that public land approach per se into these private lands, is it really opens up a lot of doors that folks have on their property that they aren't taking advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
And if they did, they'd be harvesting that buck that they're getting on camera.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's fun actually getting in and talking to these folks. And the only difference between public and private land when it comes to maybe your approach to the hunting is how much those deer are going to move during daylight.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the biggest difference. Where maybe on public you need to be a little tighter than what you can get away with on a private land, because you
Right.
can manage the amount of pressure.
Yeah.
So that there's a lot of similarities to it, especially when you take a more public land approach on lower pressure ground.
Yeah, and I think what you said there was good too. Like, there's a lot of private ground where they might not even be hunting the whole thing because they don't think they can, or they're not exactly sure how. But if you take that kind of approach of, like, even if it's something they can't do anything with management wise, you could still hunt it and have good chances at deer. It's just you have to know how to hunt, and we kind of try to do that. I try to make our videos. We do a lot based towards the private ground. I mean, of course, we do a lot of the management stuff and food plot work and all that. But I try to talk as much about why we're hunting a certain way, why we're coming in and going out the way we are, what we're doing, all that kind of stuff, because that's the stuff that does translate back to the public and vice versa.
I think there's a driving interest in public ground, and it's growing based on the amount of ground that's leased now, and the private ground that's leased now in Illinois. I think that's driving more interest in guys that are wanting to come up. Maybe they don't live here and they still want to hunt this golden triangle or whatever, or maybe they do live around here. They don't own any ground, and all the ground around them has been leased, so they get that public interest in there, maybe.
Absolutely. And I do think that is actually a huge thing that we're running into right now is private whitetail land is really becoming a hot commodity, and there's a lot of money in it. So, land's getting bought up and it's getting leased. So it's pushing a lot more people to public. But I also think that we're in a time right now, too, where people might be chasing the challenge per se. And even though they have ground to hunt, that they're wanting to hunt public to kind of challenge themselves little bit more. So I do think that we've seen a serious increase in public pressure over the last however many years here, and it's been I like seeing more people get in the woods for sure, whether it's on public or private. So
Yeah, I think like we were talking before, some of what guys will use, similar to what I'll do sometimes, use public ground for is to keep pressure off of their private ground places, and it gives you something else. And if you're just not seeing the type of deer you want on your private, you go to public ground and you have that element of surprise that you don't know what's out there. And I think some of the intrigue has to be from the availability of content based around public ground now, because like you were saying, where before on the Outdoor Channel or even the VHS tapes, you weren't seeing a lot of public ground stuff, and if it was, they weren't saying it.
yeah,
And now that there's so much more content out there based around it, guys are like, they're realizing it's available to them, and like you said, the challenge is intriguing to them, and I think that leads to some of that public ground pressure and popularity of it as well.
absolutely. And also public land is really the mindset towards public land has really changed a lot too, where you are kind of viewed as the poor hunter per se if you had to hunt public land, back in the day. But nowadays it's not really viewed that way. It's almost actually viewed as the standard of deer hunters. It seems like nowadays it's really interesting to see how that mindset towards public has evolved. And also people have realized that there's actually that quality of buck still on public land. It's not just that 2.5-year-old buck if you're lucky. There's serious opportunity at 4.5+ year old deer on public land if you know what you're doing and you can find the right spot. So that is that really opened folks' mind, and to the public land hunting, I think that has drove a lot of pressure as well.
Yeah. So obviously our season wrapped up a couple months ago, and I think Missouri's is pretty much aligned at the end with Illinois and Iowa. Most of them end around the middle of January. How did your guys' season go as far as at tactical approach there, as far as the filming and all that, and how did you guys do this year?
It went really good. So I shot my number one target buck in Kansas, which is something crazy to say. I don't think I've ever actually been able to have a target buck, quote unquote.
Right.
And then my brother Dakota shot a really nice 8-point in Missouri. So those videos turned out great. The cool part with that Kansas buck is I was watching him, since September. So you've had quite a few videos that from the scouting and trail camera pulls leading into the harvest of that buck. And then actually a couple days before I shot him, it was opening weekend in Missouri for rifle.
Yeah.
So we were in Missouri to hunt opening weekend of rifle, but I knew I was immediately jumping to Kansas on Sunday. So I hunted Saturday in Missouri, and I was set up on a escape route, a little ridge top that was an escape route from both public and private, kind of in a corner. And I darn near shot about 170-inch monster. I mean, just at first light, he just came cruising in, looking like he was escaping some folks that were walking in the woods, and he was just cruising through. And as I was getting my rifle ready, he must have skylighted me just enough, because he was probably 3 steps from being in my scope. I was like, "Dadgum, man!"
He didn't know how close he was, did he?
Absolute toad. I
Yeah.
mean, he just came in so fast. I was really trying to hurry to get my gun ready and on him, because this was, I don't think I had shooting light for 10 minutes yet. So I mean, it was right at the beginning. And then so hunting overall in Missouri was kind of tough for us. Dakota had a really hot spot throughout the season. My number one property going into this year was kind of messed up. Had a right of way cut right through the heart of it, which was what all their primary bedding and movement, and that's public land for you. It's just those uncontrollables, you know. You just kind of got to roll with it. So I had chances in Missouri, but I wasn't able to fill a tag. And then also most of my time, I really put a priority on Kansas this year, because I had such good movement, and I had this stud of a 10-point out there that I was hunting. So most of my time honestly went into Kansas this year.
Yeah, I hear that.
But awesome footage of that hunt.
Cool. I think I saw that one actually. Yeah, and yeah, it was, like I said, I think you guys do some really great work with cameras and kind of putting the hunt together and showing how it went and everything.
Appreciate that.
With the trail cameras, obviously you said it was kind of a target buck, so you guys are clearly using them. I had talked to Steve Shirk from North American Whitetail on here a couple weeks ago, and we got into how the trail camera legislation is changing, and it just keeps moving east, especially on public ground. So have you guys been affected by that yet, and what are your thoughts on that?
So trail camera use in Missouri conservation has been out for a long time. There's a few other grounds that that they don't fit that conservation land, but that on the conservation land we haven't been able to use them. And then in Kansas this year, they just passed legislation to ban public land trail cameras in state ground.
I was thinking it was Kansas that I had seen recently.
Yep. So honestly, like, trail camera use for me has not been the end all be all to the harvest of the buck. What the trail camera use for me has always been is inventory, is making sure I'm not wasting my time in an area or a location that does not hold the caliber of buck that I'm after. That's always been what I've used the trail cameras for. So that's why this year was a little bit different, where I had enough consistent movement of this buck that I could actually put a pattern together for him. So that was kind of the difference in how this hunt went, and it was kind of fun because I actually learned a lot from this deer this year. So but overall, when it comes to trail camera use, of how we've used them throughout the years, where we can use them, is taking inventory and just making sure we're not wasting our precious hunting time in areas that don't even hold the deer we're after.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. And that seemed to be, Steve hunts a lot of public ground out there and does some outfitting service out in Pennsylvania. And he was kind of saying the same thing as far as his use of the trail camera was for, like you said, making sure he's not wasting time in a place. He knows if there's a buck in there worth going in after, and helping with that. And I'd say the same thing, that I don't understand what the rush is to ban the trail cameras, because it has it can have an effect on whether or not you harvest a buck, but it has, compared to a lot of other things, very little to do with your actual success of harvesting that buck.
Yeah, and especially with card pull cameras, when it comes to cellular trail cameras like that, I see both sides of the debate. Because it doesn't kill the deer. It doesn't. You still have to be a savvy enough deer hunter to make it happen.
Right.
But there are certain situations, and I don't think those are on public. I don't think that those situations ever align on public. But there are certain situations when a cell trail camera could be used in a unfair advantage. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think though, that kind of their argument towards it is it'll drop the amount of pressure on the deer and the wildlife, and people don't want to they don't want their picture taken, or just kind of that was kind of their reasoning behind it. I honestly don't. I think the trail cameras actually help keep pressure off of the properties a little bit, because people aren't scouting it as often.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that they're more likely to stay off of that property for a few weeks, just to let the trail camera soak, or even all season.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get a cell cam out there, and you don't even have to be there.
Exactly.
I mean,
yeah,
there's
exactly.
no pressure at all on there unless you're just trying to change something or be silly about it. There's no reason to be there if you got a cell cam.
100%. And I kind of understand their reasoning, but behind people don't want their picture taken, but at the same time, like I don't really, because the opportunity of actually seeing who it is, identifying someone, and then you actually walking in front of a trail camera that you don't know is there, it could be kind of slim. So I don't know. That's kind of their reasoning behind it. I don't understand why if they're going to put a trail camera ban in place, why you just make it for public and you don't make it statewide. It just kind of I think it's driving up the price of private land on top of that. It's heightening the value of those leases and heightening the value of land sales, well, because you can use trail cameras.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And that's something I hadn't even thought about yet, was like what you're saying there. With the private land, there's more incentive there now because you can run the cameras on them. And the picture thing is weird to me, because especially being on public ground, like walk into Walmart, that's a public place. I mean, you're getting your picture taken every time you go in there.
Get out of a car in a parking lot at one of those places and see where. Get out of the car in a parking lot at a state park or something.
Yep.
See if there's not a camera under a soffit or somewhere.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely.
They're taking your picture anyway.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the thing too. We had this explained to us once by a conservation agent in Missouri. Is he's like, well, if someone decides to take a dump in front of your camera, that they don't want that they're put up on social media. And I was like, well, if you don't look around,
exactly, yeah,
before you go,
do it quick,
you go,
you deserve it, right?
Like I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Besides that, that's going to be way harder on me having to see that than it is them posting it on, Yeah. It's not that
age-old question, does it dump in the woods, right?
I look around on private ground before I take a leak.
100%, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know how to answer that one.
Yeah. I don't either. Yeah, it's definitely an odd thing to me, and we'll see. I think it's probably just going to get stricter, and it's just going to keep moving into the Midwest. But that'll be conversations we'll have down the line too. But I think it is important for people to know that's there, because there's a lot of guys out there who are just oblivious to it, that either don't hunt public ground, or even that do, and they don't really know that stuff's getting closer and closer to affecting us all the time. And obviously it is affecting you guys. And then at some point it will be, it could lead to ban of use on private ground too, because if they can get it passed on the public ground, and then what's going to keep them from wanting to ban them on private ground, especially if their part of their argument is, well, it's unfair to the game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Boone and Crockett Club, I don't even think they accept deer that were taken with assistance of cellular trail cameras.
No kidding.
I don't even think they accept deer that were taken with assistance of cellular trail cameras.
That's crazy.
I think they've had maybe conversations about actual trail cameras in general, but I have to confirm that, obviously, but that is something that I've seen and heard in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Is that they did actually put that into place where you can't put your deer into the books if that was something you're interested in.
Right.
If you used cellular trail cameras.
Yeah.
So that's just one more place.
Yep. Yep. So
So
we're kind of on trail cameras, and you mentioned like they were talking about the pressure there, and that got me thinking. As far as like on public ground and stuff, obviously on private we don't have to do it as much. We can do it from a stand essentially. How much in-season scouting are you guys doing when you're hunting public ground? And I know some of that probably has to do with if you're jumping around, like we talked about. You guys are going to try to do this year maybe, and I don't want to spoil anything if you hadn't talked about it yet. But when you're jumping around from place to place, you only have a limited time to scout and figure out what's there. But how much in-season scouting are you guys actually doing?
almost more than I'm hunting.
Yeah.
So it does me no good to sit in an area that I don't have active sign.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I have been trying to, especially this last year, I did a lot of in-season scouting in both Missouri and Kansas, because my plans in Missouri kind of got folded with pressure and construction and my main property. So I kind of had to try to catch up and figure out a place to hunt. And then in Kansas, I actually wasn't able to do any postseason scouting last year.
Mm-hmm.
So putting together the pattern on this buck and a different buck, even I had to figure out exactly how these deer were using this area, and I tried to do it as meticulously and as slow as possible.
Right.
So where postseason scouting, I would have figured all of this data out in like 1 to 2 days, because I would have just dove into it and figured it out. Where I allowed myself time during season, preseason and then and early season, to kind of figure this out, and then let the scrapes open up. Because that was the thing too, is we really didn't have open scrapes yet. We found them pretty early in September, but they weren't widespread yet. So that was kind of one of those deals that we kind of had to let the deer slowly expose their movement to us,
Right.
to me to hunt. So I was able to use trail cameras this year, and I did a lot of scouting.
Yeah.
I think that will be something. Obviously, with me bouncing from state to state like I'm doing, I'll do that a lot, just to make sure I'm staying on consistent movement.
Right.
And fresh movement. But yeah, I do a lot of in-season scouting.
Okay, so you mentioned scrapes there a little bit. What are some things? And obviously, there's a lot of nuance to it. What are some things that you're looking for when you're doing your in-season scouting that are telling you this is where the deer are moving right now? They've been here recently. They're going to continue to use this for a certain period of time. What are some things you're looking for?
I'm looking for scat, and I'm looking for hoof prints in the scrape. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for something that's obviously been used, and it's obviously been used very recently. I'm going to give you an example from my Kansas hunt this year. Actually, what ended up getting this deer killed. I had a scrape figured out in a stand position set. It wasn't set up, but it was for my saddle. So I had the tree picked out in a trail camera since September on this one scrape. And over time, it kind of, as the season progressed into October, that scrape started to dry up. And I went in for a hunt on that tree. I had the right wind, went in for a hunt. And on my way in the morning, I actually found 2 super beat, super fresh scrapes 50 yards away from where this other scrape was. And, it was a little bit more in the cover, a little bit more towards the point of this particular ridge, but I didn't have any camera on it. So all of my deer pick pictures slowed down, and especially with this buck, I didn't get any pictures of him. So I went back, I checked the scrape that I was originally hunting, that 50, 60 yards away, and it was dry, completely dry. So I immediately set up on this tree for that day. And during midday, I pulled that camera and set it up on this new fresh scrape that I just found, and immediately got pictures of him on that camera. Now I didn't know that until I actually went back and hunted it the day I ended up actually killing him.
Right.
So that's kind of, but if I hunted that original scrape, I probably would have never got a shot on him.
Right.
Because it would have put me way out of place.
You'd have been,
it wasn't that far away, but it would have put me just out of place. So, when I'm looking for those scrapes, like, it needs to be obvious that the deer are using it. And if it's super beat down, then they're using it heavy right now. And there's a really good chance that there's a good buck using it as well. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. It has to have, masked trees, and it has to have bedding close, and it has to be in some cover or alongside some cover, so those deer feel comfortable using it during daylight.
Right.
But and there's a lot of things that go into a good daylight scrape. But the moment you find one that's got all those pieces, that's in the covers, close to bedding, there's good masked trees and browse around, and it looks like it's getting beat, then you need to hunt it, and you hunt it now.
Right.
You know what I mean? You need to pick yourself a cold front, and you hunt that first cold front, and then more than likely you're going to kill that deer.
Yeah.
So whether you know what the deer is or not,
right.
And I use this tactic a lot. I love scrape hunting, and I killed my Missouri 9-point in 21 on that same tactic. The week before, I found some beet scrapes that were super freshly open, and I set up on them the next week on that first cold front, and I shot that buck. Used a similar technique in Iowa to kill that 8-point. And a somewhat similar technique for my 170 that same year.
Yeah.
In Missouri, but that was a lot more rut movement than scraping, but the scrapes were open and they're fresh.
Yeah.
So they had all the pieces. It was thick bedding cover. It was concealed movement. They had producing oaks in the scrape and all around it. And you could tell that the deer were just beating it down and using it.
Yeah, that's actually one of the better pieces that I hunt. Is just 10 acres, so actually in a lot of ways it has similarities to public ground, other than I can put some food on it and stuff. I have control over at least that 10 acres. But when I go in there, generally, because it's not big enough to hold deer, especially mature bucks, there's a group of does that'll stay there most of the time. But as far as mature bucks goes, I just don't have enough room to hold them there. So when I start seeing, and this is, of course, a lot more before I started using the cell cams, but even now still using them, when I go in there on my way to the stand and I see, and it's usually in the same areas, there's certain scrapes like what you're talking about that have been freshened up recently and that I can tell have been recently used, I know there's a good chance that I'm going to see at least a buck on that particular sit, or within that week.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of your tell that your spot's hot. Is if those scrapes that you're on are fresh, and that's something we'll go back to, in-season scouting. What I try to do with my in-season scouting is be extremely precise. I don't just wander the woods. So I scout it postseason, and I figure out everything that actually matters on property. And then what I go, so I find those scrapes that should be good daylight scrapes, but we'll see, right? They should be good daylight scrapes, and I'll mark them. And then what I do is I go back to them during season, and I figure out which ones are fresh, which ones are open. And the moment one opens up, either I already have a trail camera on it and waiting for them to show up, or it, if I'm able to use it, or I go ahead and I'm like, okay, this needs to be set. This is open. When's the next cold front? I'm going to come in and hunt it on that next cold front because there's something using it right now.
So how often are you guys hunting based on the weather? Are you still hunting every day that you have available to hunt, or are you only hunting on the better days? Or and kind of what we do is like if we have certain days to hunt, we might hunt them, but if the weather's not right or we don't have that cold front coming, we won't necessarily hunt our best spots until the weather's going to be like one of those days where you just know they're going to be moving. What is your guys' kind of approach to that as far as the kind of the weather and all that?
So I am a huge believer in weather. I hunt it religiously. And one thing that I also do too is I like using those bad weather days as days to gather intel.
Yeah.
So because I've got so many different properties that I'm keeping tabs on, it would be a terrible day maybe to hunt. Maybe I only have a morning. Maybe the morning's the only time that'd be really good to hunt because it's just going to be hot that day or it's going to be windy or something. I'll go in there and I'll hunt a spot I'm curious about. Maybe not my best spot, if that's not what I'm interested in, but I'll hunt close to it. And then I'll go in and I'll gather intel that I need to gather to see if I actually need to hunt it or not. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's where it comes into precision hunting is if I got a bad weekend with it's going to be hot, not good hunting weather. I've been hunting this property on a regular basis. Maybe I need to let it sit, and I'll go check out a different property. You know what I mean? That I've had tabs on, and I've been paying attention to, but I haven't really been hunting hard.
Right.
That'd be a great time to actually go in there and if I have trail camera set, let's check those trail cameras, and then also if there's scrapes, see if the scrapes are fresh. Just kind of see what's going on. If there's fresh deer movement on the trails and there's a lot of deer scat, then there's active movement, or it's just dry. That's a lot of times too. Is I find those places. I like, I've said this a lot. Is it's just as important to find places not to hunt as it is to find places to hunt.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm kind of scratching things off the list as I go throughout the season, or I'm circling them.
Yeah, because you don't want to waste those best days in a spot that doesn't have anything because you didn't take the time to go look.
100%, and that's what those bad weather days are for. And if you want to say you got some private land and you know exactly what's going on, it's bad wet weather, so you don't want to go use your best spots. Well, maybe if you got a spot you can get in and get out a little bit lower intrusion, and you still got your good wind, and there might be this opportunity that a deer steps out, or you just sit there and you observe what the deer are doing. You sit, if you have a box blind, maybe on a food plot, you can observe deer from distance and just kind of see what they're doing, which would give you intel on your better spot that's back there in the woods.
Yep.
So there's things that you can do to get around those bad weather days. I definitely say if you've got them, be out there, but you don't hunt your best spots.
Yeah, one of the things that I'll mention a lot is it's hard, you can't kill that buck today, but you can definitely keep yourself from killing him tomorrow.
And that's where that saying, you can't kill a deer on the couch. Well, you're right, you can't.
Right.
But on the flip side of things, you can keep yourself from killing that buck if you choose a day to go in the woods when you should have just sat on the couch.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Austin, I'm going to jump in here for a second and kind of change the subject for a second.
Yeah.
So obviously, public ground could be anywhere from, say, a state park to a national forest. So I guess a kind of a two-part question: what's the smallest trek you've hunted versus the largest trek? And if you had your druthers, what kind of trek would you like to, would be like the perfect for you, size
Ooh,
wise?
man, good question. Probably the smallest track I've hunted has been a few hundred acres. And I was 50-50 on that spot, but it ended up being that was that same property that I shot my 170 on, and I got video of a 190. So it's like that was freaking awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I regularly hunt, properties that are that 7 to 10,000, 13,000 acres, and actually one of the property I hunted last year in Kansas, man, I think that one may have been close to 15,000. So, and I'm hunting an even bigger property this year in Kansas. It's so I mean I guess if I were to choose, I would rather choose the medium to large size, just because I'm able to find more areas that these deer are getting away from the pressure. Not necessarily the furthest walk, but the overlooked spots. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
It gives me more options, I guess. If I were to make a 3 to 6 hour drive, that 7 to 20,000 acre property gives me more opportunity to possibly find that buck versus that 100 to 300 acre property that is a 50-50 shot, whether it's absolutely gold mine or it's overrun by hunting pressure. So I won't count out a good small property. I'll give it a shot. But I like to piece a few of those together. If I can find a few of them in a general area, that I could feel good about my trip.
Sure.
And then,
sure.
But if I can piece together as many acres as possible, like when I went to Iowa, I think I had around 80,000 acres within a 30-minute drive of where I was staying. So that's not just one property. That was multiple properties. So
Right.
I kind of
Yeah.
myself into a hub that had an unlimited amount of possibilities, and I was like, you can't tell me that I can't find a deer to hunt on 80,000 acres. So
In Iowa, right?
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Iowa,
No
Yeah.
kidding.
yeah. So
Sure.
so especially with my out of state hunts, I always try to lean on that small to large scale, just because I feel like it gives me a lot of opportunity, but to find those overlooked spots. But I mean, no matter where I go, I'm running into pressure. There's people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It
So
just seems like maybe, and I understand what you're saying. Around here, people have that idea that if you find that 200-acre patch, that it's just being hit from all sides, and there is
yeah,
some truth to that. Yeah.
yeah, and that's the same here, and it's that there is a lot of truth to that. We found those 200, 300 acre spots that are just getting hammered, and is only being used as move through property, at night,
Right.
and especially with those bucks. But on the flip side of things, there are those little hidden gems that for whatever reason people aren't getting to either they're not hunting it very often, or they're just not getting to certain parts of it for whatever reason it might be, and it's an absolute just gold mine for deer. So it's kind of a 50-50 shot as what I found on the smaller properties.
Yeah, we're actually a friend of ours that's on the podcast. He hunts just south of a public property, and the movement of hunters on the public property actually affects him, and he's hunting private ground. Right?
Yeah.
Of course, it borders it, and so some of the smarter guys that are hunting the public ground are playing the wind, but it's killing him in certain times of the year.
Yeah.
So it affects private ground as well, the pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that, yeah, it's cool to be able to butt up against public. Maybe you can pull some deer off of it that are being pushed around and whatnot. But also, like you said, if the wind is right for them on public, it may be blowing out your property
Yeah,
for that day.
he found that out, and
You're on the
his
downwind side of it.
trail cameras just went blank, and it took us a minute or two to figure it out, but we did,
Yeah.
and that's what was going on. So it happens.
Yeah,
They weren't doing
it does.
anything wrong. We weren't mad at them or anything. It's just
Yeah.
just hunting.
That's just hunting. Yeah. And it's just something that you can, knowing that that's gonna happen. Maybe you just work your hunting efforts around that.
Yeah, last year was actually the first year he hunted that piece of property, and we learned that.
Okay.
And so now, obviously, we're changing this year.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it was 2 years ago. So obviously, we're changing this year, based on what we believe that those guys are going to do and the way the wind plays and all that. So yeah, we're going to try to make that to our advantage again.
Yeah, I was going to say you could probably even make that to your advantage on the wind that doesn't blow into your property.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
On those, like what you're talking about, finding those spots that are just maybe overlooked, what's maybe the most obscure place that you've either had an encounter with a nice buck or just found sign of one or had pictures of one that for some reason people just overlooked it? You don't have to get like too specific to where people know where you're at, but like what are some places like that just seem like they shouldn't have been overlooked that they were? Or is there one that comes to mind?
So actually, there's one that comes to mind from my scouting this spring so far in Kansas. I went to a different property, not the property I was hunting, but a different property. And I found it was dry with deer sign. I was really having trouble finding deer sign. When I did, it was very sporadic. But I heard good things about this property and whatnot. So I'm like, oh, let's go check it out. And then what I ran into is this tiniest little bench, and it was enclosed with cedars.
Mm-hmm.
It couldn't have been 10 yards by 20 yards tops, tiniest little bench, and it had a well, and from an old
like from an old house place or something.
Yeah, exactly, from an old homestead. An old well there, and it was surrounded by producing oaks. I'm like, man, there has to be a buck bed here. This is too good not to have a buck bed.
Right.
And I found that these cedars on this little bench were shredded.
Yeah.
And they were big cedars. And that they were big cedars. And then I found there was a scrape maybe 20 or 30 yards away. And that was the only serious deer sign I found in that general area. And I'm like, man, I was like, you can tell these deer are getting pressured. I said, that's why there's not as much deer sign. But I wonder why he feels so comfortable right here.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't super difficult to get to. It's just that he feels comfortable there for whatever reason. So, yeah, it was just out of nowhere, this tiny little patch of cedar trees surrounded by oaks on a little tiny bench that he could kind of tuck himself up against the hill on just enough.
Yep.
So it was, clearly he knows how to survive and escape in that spot, and that's why he's using it.
Yeah, he just feels safe there for whatever reason.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Some of the places that I found some of my best spots is these are areas that there's hunting pressure all around it.
Right.
But for whatever reason, they aren't actually hunting that ridge that often or that draw, whatever that little spot might be.
Mm-hmm.
And these deer have figured out exactly where they need to be, and they know exactly what their escape route is.
Yep.
So they can sense anything coming from a distance and escape, and you don't even know that they're there.
Right.
So and there's not widespread sign. It's the tiniest pocket of sign. And I think people look past those pockets just because they're not this slap you in the face kind of
right. Like
location.
there may be fresh sign, but it's not a lot of sign, so guys are overlooking it, you think?
Yeah.
So,
And the deer know how to survive in it,
mhm,
so that they're just beating whatever hunting pressure is around it.
right. So
Yeah.
let's back up a little bit here. On the tactical approach, like you talked about, the business side of it, can you explain a little bit of what you guys do as far as on the business side?
Absolutely. So I do private land management consulting.
Mm-hmm.
I also run in-person workshops, which will be fired up this summer, which I'm very excited about. That's going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And have an online deer hunting course, Deer Hunting Academy. But everything I've done for a while has been kind of tailored to the adult onset deer hunter. Someone getting into it, at a later date
Right.
where I grew up with it. But everything I do, I keep very advanced tactics still in my teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So in my what in everything I do with the course, with workshops and all, because I want, no matter who shows up or who takes that course, that they get something from it.
Right.
So I've got it to where it's understandable enough for the very beginning deer hunter, but the more advanced intermediate deer hunter can also take something from it and increase their success on larger deer.
Right.
So those are the three main facets of the business. Obviously the virtual side when it comes to the Deer Hunting Academy, but my workshops are going to be very mobile hunting forward.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a lot of kind of a quote unquote classroom style of learning and question and answer at the beginning. Get to know each other, kind of know who's in the audience,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll get in the field. We'll go over some areas that I look for, what I look for, kind of get a visual of it. And I'll have saddles set up. I'll have tree stands set up. We can teach anybody who's interested in it on how to use that equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And as well, as a beginning hunter, learning how to efficiently and safely set up a tree stand
Right.
or a saddle and whatnot. That's very essential, and that's what I've helped guys out with in the past. I had obviously had someone to show me that, and there's videos to it, but it only goes so far compared to that hands-on in-person learning
Yeah, and they
experience.
can ask direct questions and stuff. That's a big thing
Exactly.
too. Yep. In real
Yeah,
time.
exactly. In
So,
real time, exactly.
yep. So with you guys doing a lot of that, I kind of asked that to lead into another question I had
Yeah.
because we see themes when we go to client properties and talk to guys. There, a lot of times we'll see them having the same issue. So and it is attributed to the same things a good portion of the time as well. So what's
Yep.
probably the most common mistake you see guys making when it comes to just like hunting strategy or how they're hunting?
They get married to tree stands.
Okay.
That's probably the one big one I see a lot
Mm-hmm.
is you've had this box blind set, and a lot of those box blinds they're permanent. They're sunk in the ground,
Right.
or they've got a tree stand set that's been there for 10, 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they just always set it. You know, every few years that they'll shoot a big deer out of it, and then they'll just kind of struggle on those in between years. And what I found is, I mean, those deer know where that spot is. They know where that stands at.
Mm-hmm.
So they adjust their movement around that stand, and also that they've learned how to wind that stand. So you'll be getting pictures of these deer at that stand, but the moment you hunt it, you don't see those deer.
Right.
It's because they know how to win that stand,
Mm-hmm.
and that they'll just hold off, back in the bedding, until you vacate after dark, and then they'll come in and you'll get a picture of them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So that's kind of something I've seen a lot is just kind of getting married to a spot and not hunting it mobile.
Mm-hmm.
That goes right back to taking a little bit more of a public land approach to a private land.
Mm-hmm.
Is that they're not hunting it mobile, that they're hunting set stand locations. So, and being unable to adjust that 50 to 100 yards if they need to adjust.
Mm-hmm.
And that 50 to 100 yards, as especially as a bow hunter, is a make or break at whether you harvest that buck or not.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there are places guys can get away with that. There are stand sets that are going to be consistently good year after year for whatever reason, but then we'll see that. We do see that a lot too, where guys will get just in year to year, and when we do set up a property for a guy or give him a plan, even if we recommend stand locations, we'll always give the caveat that what you're doing is definitely going to change things. So even if this would have been a good spot in the past, you still have to be willing and able to move that stand if you need to. So if you're sitting here and you're seeing all the deer 100 yards away consistently, move the stand 50, 60, 70 yards, whatever it needs to be, to get to where those deer are moving.
100% agree. And something too I see a lot is we have this idea that we can manipulate deer movement by using management practices.
Mm-hmm.
And the simple fact is that big buck's not going to do anything that he doesn't feel comfortable doing. So and that he doesn't feel safe doing. So
right.
That the best thing we can ask of that buck is that he spends the majority of his life on our property.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best thing we can ask of that deer. And then we need to be a hunter and adjust to him.
Mm-hmm.
Shortening up food plots, or maybe trying to block a trail, or force movement into a specific area that they don't already want to use.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's where I think that folks kind of get lost, is that we can't just manipulate these deer into do whatever the heck we want to do, no matter how sweet the pot is.
Right.
That if they don't feel safe doing it, they're not going to do it.
Yep. We talk about that a lot too, is you can only make a move so far. So you can exactly. influence movement to a point, but just because you plant an acre food plot on one side of your 80-acre property, that doesn't mean the deer are going to all of a sudden go over there like a magnet if that's not where they want to be going anyway.
Exactly. And I've seen deer too. Another misconception is that deer are naturally just going to use a feeder if it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that some of these mature bucks won't use that feeder just because of its placement.
Mm-hmm.
So that they don't feel comfortable going out there and using it. And you get a bunch of doe pictures and young bucks, but those bigger bucks are staying back in the timber.
Mm-hmm.
And they're feeding off the edge of that food plot, but they're not walking out there all the way in the middle to feed off of that feeder, which is so that's kind of another thing too. Keep an open mind.
Yep.
Because he might not be doing something that you think he should be doing. So
yeah, feeders are an interesting one to me, because we can't use them here in Illinois, but some of the properties we worked on, guys will have them, and the location of most of them has always just been
it's mind-boggling.
It's really puzzling to me. And it's like you're saying, just because you put it here doesn't mean they're going to use it. And they'll have a feeder full of corn 30 yards away from a 100-acre cornfield. You know what I mean? He's not.
And 10 steps away from their deer blind.
Exactly. Yeah. Right on top of it, where they're coming in and out all the time and leaving all their scent and all that.
That's where the education comes in. That's where the education needs to come in.
For some reason, there's this fallacy that that feeders are magic and deer will automatically come to them. But you're right. It definitely. It's just a puzzling one to me a lot of times. Yeah,
and that's we can't force these deer into doing something that they don't want to do. And if it works out best for us, that's not necessarily what's going to work out best for that deer. And that's where we have to learn how to work with that animal a little bit more than trying to manipulate him and force him into in an area. I mean, if you use those same tools and you align them with what he feels comfortable doing, dude, it's an absolute gold mine.
Yep.
I mean, that same tool that was not working for you back then is now going to work for you.
Yeah.
And multiply your success because you used it in line with what he feels comfortable doing.
Yeah, put that feeder where he wants it, not where you want it, and then hunt it where he wants it. That's and figure out how to hunt where he wants it. Yeah.
Exactly. And let him be safe there. Let him feel safe, and then you be precise as a deer hunter. And that's that kind of hunt that's a one and done hunt. If you do it right, that's kind of that one cold front. You go in there on the right wind and that cold front that he's using it on a regular basis, that could be one hunt in that stand and you shot your target buck.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's another thing even on just habitat management and improvements is a lot of guys will go put all that work in, but again, it's either not where that deer wants to be or they won't make it any easier on themselves to hunt. And I think you got to keep that in mind too, where you're doing this stuff to increase your chances of harvesting that buck. So do it with the idea that you're making it easier on yourself to hunt, whether that be access or putting it in the right spot for wind directions or around a good stand location, that kind of stuff. And all that is based on somewhat, at least a good part of it, where that deer is comfortable being anyway.
yeah, exactly. And if you listen, they'll tell you where they like to be. It might be very subtle clues, but they'll tell you where they like to be, and that's just kind of, and then you can sweeten that pot a little bit with your management, and just really make a dynamite property.
Yep.
And too is you said this earlier with your 10-acre properties that there's no way you can keep a deer on that buck on that property. That's another thing I think guys get lost on is unless you've got thousands and thousands of acres, there's no way you're going to keep that one buck on your property solely for his entire life, no matter how good of a property that you create. He's going to travel miles.
Right.
Go ahead. That goes back to that, culling, that only works in a high fence. It doesn't work with wild deer.
Right.
So, those deer will travel, and you just have to create a place where he feels safe enough to spend most of his life.
Hey, back in the day, I traveled miles myself, looking for
right?
Right? Didn't we all?
Yeah.
Looking for the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me, it kind of leads into another thing I was going to mention. As I saw a reel from you today, and it was perfectly aligned with what I preach all the time and it's what we're talking about right now, is most of the time, guys don't have that kind of ground, so you're not going to hold that buck on your property 24/7, 365. So set it up to where he's spending most of his daylight hours on your property when you can actually hunt him. I think that's a big thing that gets overlooked, and guys get caught up in providing them with summer habitat and food so they'll be there then, and it's just a waste of space most of the time. And even if me and Nate, the other guy who's on the podcast, were talking about this a few weeks ago, even if I had thousands of acres where I could take half of it and make it summer habitat and the other half and make it fall habitat, I'm still going to make it all fall habitat because that's the only time I can hunt it anyway.
100%. I mean, I might, if I had enough land to have some summer, I think I'll put some out there. Give them that summer nutrition, maybe help entice some antler growth,
right?
And keep a healthy herd. But I want my property to be where they want to be during the fall, when it matters.
I think that is a great point you just made though. If you're doing summer habitat, don't necessarily do it to keep the deer there. Do it for the health of the herd.
Yeah, and that's really what summer habitat is for.
Mm-hmm.
So, summer habitat's not just to keep deer. That's not necessarily what we're looking for, because that deer could shift miles to a
Mm-hmm.
fall range.
Especially
But
especially bucks.
yeah, 100%. But maybe we can help increase the overall health of the herd,
Mm-hmm.
and in turn help create larger antlers and a little bit better overall deer for years to come.
Yeah,
That's
we've
where it
discussed
comes to.
that quite a bit on this podcast about the health of the herd. A doe is half of the antler growth of a buck. They just are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that too is what somewhat debunks the culling idea for wild deer.
Mm-hmm.
Is that doe is half of the work when it comes to overall antler size. You could have a funky buck breed a doe, and the product of that buck could be an absolute stud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because the doe was just right.
Yep. And then actually she probably has more than half to do with it, because if she has good antler genetics, so she's given that to that buck, and also she's responsible for the nutrition of that buck for the first year of its life, and even in the gestation period, which has a lot to do with their potential for antler growth.
Yep. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, but what you were saying and that reel I saw today, I thought just was really good about, making the most, because a lot of guys are in situations, private landowners, where they have 80, 100, 200 acres, or a 20 or a 40 or even less. Why not make it the most efficient it can be and the most effective it can be? Because the biggest thing we can do to improve antler size is advance the deer to the next age class. And the best way we can do that is have them on our property during hunting season, when we can decide whether they get to walk or not.
100% correct. Yep. Absolutely.
So the more time they're spending on us, the less time they're on the neighbor who might shoot them when they're 3.5 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree.
So you guys, you said you do quite a bit of in-season scouting. What are you guys doing right now? Off-season scouting? How much are you guys using maps? How much are you getting boots on the ground? Are you doing any shed hunting right now? I know there's probably different rules and regulations on that depending on where you're at, and public ground and stuff. But what are you guys doing right now?
A lot of map scouting and a lot of boots on the ground postseason scouting. I Postseason scouting for me is probably half of what I contribute to my success and consistent success. And really, what I'm doing is I'm gathering as many possible opportunities as possible. As many different properties, locations on property, and then really diving into an area that during season I can't be that intrusive.
Right.
But during this time of year, I can be. So I'm getting in there and I am figuring out every little detail that I can about that spot, because that information I can use going into not only hunting but in season scouting. And the moment that he shows up during my in season scouting in the fall, I already know what that property looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So I can be super precise on my hunting and my scouting to figure out where he's using the most, and then put those puzzle pieces that together on them, and kind of get in faster. You know what I mean? Get on him immediately, and rather than kind of wandering the woods during the fall.
Right.
So I really contribute most of my success to my postseason scouting. And last year I wasn't able to do as much as I'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
And the properties in Missouri that I wanted to hunt the most, and those are the ones that I did most of my postseason scouting for, ended up kind of being busts for me. So, I didn't have a lot of properties on hand that I typically do.
Right.
So, and then going into this next year, with this Whitetail Slam goal that I have, I'm hunting a lot of different states this year. This is a huge this is a huge adventure.
Yeah.
So, I'll be as prepared as possible going into the fall. Not only with as many properties as possible, but as many of the states I plan on hunting, and really just streamline my fall and help me feel confident going into a hunt.
Yeah, because you're going to want to spend as much time as you can on set waiting for that buck as opposed to looking
Yep.
for him. If
100%.
And that's, I think, going to be key to your success when you're doing that, is being able to spend that time with a good chance of harvesting the buck. Because like you said, all those different states and all the traveling you're going to be doing, you're going to be limited in the time you're going to have on stand.
Yeah, and that's 5 different states in 4 different regions,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a really big goal. It's a very attainable goal, but it's a very big goal, especially wanting to harvest, a little bit more mature buck.
Right.
So, so the trick to the possible success of that will be my preparation.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm trying, I'm working as hard as I can until that green up starts.
Yep.
To be as prepared as possible for my fall properties. And then once June comes, I can get out to Kentucky and really start trying to find me some velvet bucks
Mm-hmm.
to put a pattern together for September.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So I think we've covered a lot. We'll get you out of here for sure. Would love to have you back on sometime too. So we'll stay in touch about that. But before I do get you out of here, if you want to, where can people follow you at, like on your socials, and what would be the best place? Where that be YouTube, Instagram, all of it? Just kind of tell everybody where they can find you.
Absolutely. So Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Tactical Approach Outdoors. If you just look up that, you'll find me everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And Facebook, I've got a page as well. But I really push my Instagram and YouTube probably the most. And then tacticalapproachoutdoors.com is where you're going to find more information about who I am, who we are, and the business. So that's where you'll find my services, my consulting services, workshops, and Deer Hunter Academy. Everything will be on tacticalapproachoutdoors.com. And then, yeah, if you want to look more about who I am and what kind of hunting I like to do, go on my YouTube channel at Tactical Approach Outdoors. You'll get a really good idea about what I like to do and what I'm all about.
Yeah. So, and on your, like, the business side, are you guys still booking for this year, or are you looking out towards next year already, or if people are interested?
Absolutely. I'm still booking for this year. Most of my consulting work kind of gets done in the winter and the spring, but if anybody wants some work done during the summer, I'm all ears for a conversation, and then I'll really start pushing, getting clients scheduled for next winter and going into spring soon. But we definitely still have time to get some postseason scouting done, get some planning done before planting season really gets kicked off. And, if you're a smaller property and you're not interested in planting summer food, obviously we can wait a little bit longer before that planting really has to take place for fall.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
And you're on your courses and stuff like that, you planning to do that, some of that, you said later this year still yet?
Yeah. So Father's Day weekend is my first workshop scheduled so far. And I plan on doing more along those lines. And I would like to, I don't know if this year I'll be traveling from state to state, but next year I'd like to get multiple states kind of scheduled and kind of move around the country a little bit and really offer a lot of workshops for different areas and reach a lot of people.
Yeah.
So,
and when you guys start doing that, or when you get solid on when and where and all that, and if you're going to do it anywhere else, for sure let us know, and I'll at least put the word out for you. And we do a lot of the similar stuff, and it seems like we think a lot along the same lines. I think So if you guys ever wanted any help with that or get some other guys in there involved with it, for sure, we would love to help you out too.
That sounds awesome, man. Yeah, well, let's keep in touch about that. I'll definitely game to have conversations, and I love offering more to my customers and clients as much as I can, and giving them a lot of value for what they're paying for.
Yeah, and hey, when you're in Illinois, let us know, and we'll get you in here in the studio, and we'll do another podcast.
Oh, that sounds perfect. Yeah, I'm hoping to get out there, in the next month or so. I'll try to get out there before the green up really gets bad.
Right.
So I'll keep you updated along those lines. But yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting up and getting out there to Illinois.
Yeah, hey, we walked a little bit today, and it's greening up. It's starting to happen, dude.
Yeah, I know. I was in Alabama a couple weeks ago for a client, and man, they were green down there.
Yeah.
So it's starting to work its way up north here. It's not as green as it was down there, but it's starting to make its way up here pretty quick.
Right.
Yep.
Hey, Austin, it's good to talk to you again, and I'll see you on the circuit. Hopefully, if you come in the studio, I'll say hey, and appreciate you coming on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, man. Again, we'll do it again sometime. So thanks, everybody. If you want to check Austin out and what they're doing, it's Tactical Approach Outdoors or Tactical Approach Outdoors on the website too. So thanks for coming on, man. We'll be in touch.
Sounds good, buddy. I appreciate you having me on.